Welcome back, everyone. Let's bring in NBC Think contributor and political strategist Ashley Pratt, Democrat strategist and founding partner of Northern Starr Strategies, Michael Starr Hopkins, and MSNBC political contributor and former Republican congressman from Florida, David Jolly. Great to have all of you with us. Let me begin with you, if I can, David, in Florida. First of all, the Republican Party right now is at this crossroads. You have a president who is claiming victory and is falsely saying that he has essentially won a second term, and yet we're not necessarily hearing from every rank-and-file Republican saying this is not how it's going to be. We have to wait until all the votes are counted. Where do you see the complicitness of the Republican Party at this point with what the president is tweeting?
No, it's a great question, Eamon, because, look, this is a president who is needing to control the narrative, but to do so, he desperately needs allies. And the only public allies we're seeing within the Republican Party right now are those who typically kind of operate around the fringes and empower some of the fringe narratives. Look, where the president sits tonight, he's kind of wrestling with three elements, or three opportunities, if you will. The first is to be able to actually capture the votes. It's largely out of his control, right? But if there is one pathway still left, the president doesn't want to completely resign that over and then shift to a second element or strategy, which is the legal one. But we know they're wrestling with the legal one as well. And with that, you know, there is the minutia. Can you challenge certain ballots, certain deadlines, and so forth? Those are the cases we're seeing right now. But the inflection point for the president and for his Republican allies is sort of the nuclear option, which is the big legal option. And though it hasn't been talked about a lot, the president may decide to escalate this, and the final legal move is to try to prevent certification of the results in these states. And that requires kind of a full-scale attack on our election system, right? Could he make a case before a court that, look, the Secretary of State of Pennsylvania or Georgia or Arizona should be prevented from certifying the results? Is it because of the vote-by-mail changes or the vote-by-mail apparatus? Is it because of the postal issues? A broad-scale argument. But that's where he doesn't have the allies right now within the Republican Party, and to successfully do so would require a significant public affairs strategy that we're just not seeing right now.
Well, I'm curious about this, because I was talking to Bob Costa about the Republican Party and what they thought of the president's behavior, declaring he was a winner the other night, and Bob Costa said, and we've heard this 1,000 times, that privately Republicans were very upset, but publicly they're not going to come out and break with the president. How far is the Republican Party, your former party, how far are they willing to go to back this president up?
Yeah, Katie, I love that question. I've wrestled with it. The number of conversations I've had about the demise of the Republican Party in the past 4 years matches many others, particularly on this network. What I'm about to say is not to shift the narrative, but it's more a concern we talked about last night about how our nation behaves in a partisan way, and it's this. There's been no attrition among the Republican Party under Trump in terms of performance. Republicans typically perform about 50% in presidential elections. That's roughly what we saw last night. So why do they need to course correct if they're still performing at 50%? And I would flip the script and ask Democrats, how could you let this guy get 50%? This guy. How have you not found a way to actually grow your blue coalition in 2020 and beat Donald Trump by a wider margin? I think that's a question we'll wrestle with.
Well, Michael, that's a good question for you to answer.
It is. You know, when I talk to Democrats or Republicans on the Hill, both of them tonight are very frustrated. Republicans, because the worst scenario for them was a close loss for Donald Trump. A close loss means they can't really, you know, kick him to the curb, repudiate him, and move on. Now it's guaranteed that he's going to be a big voice in the party. And on the side of Democrats, it's just like David said, how can we not beat this guy? 250,000 Americans dead. The economy is now hurting. Americans are upset. It doesn't bode well for Democrats moving forward. So we've got to figure out how we're going to talk to Republicans and independents and make a better message.
Ashley, let's pick up on that point for a moment. If we were to assume everything holds as is and Joe Biden, as he says, he anticipates becoming the next president of the United States and the Senate remains in the hands of the Republicans. I know those are a lot of ifs I'm throwing your way, but if, in fact, that does stay that way, we are looking at a very divided government at a time that the country is extremely divided, with a lot of things that get done, chiefly among them stimulus relief for the millions of Americans that are struggling and can't afford to get by on a daily basis.
Well, let's say all of those hypotheticals are in fact true. You would have Joe Biden, who would be the perfect leader for that very unique moment, because even in his speeches thus far, he, one, has not claimed victory, has just showed his pathway to 270, right? That this could be the eventual situation. But he's importantly said that he would be an American president. And this is a theme that he has conveyed multiple times continuously throughout his campaign, because he knew he was going to get the support of people like me, who were former Republicans, who are now independent, who voted a blue ticket. And that's exactly the new situation we've created here in the United States. And to Michael's point, you know, we have a lot of independents that Biden was able to pick up in this election. And I do want to give his infrastructure credit for that, because suburban female voters, and that was who tipped the scales for Trump in 2016, they came out 55 to 44% in favor of Biden nationally this time around in 2020, according to preliminary exit polling. So I'm sure we're going to see data kind of shift on that, but that's a huge change in turnout. And that really shows you the direction of which, you know, kind of this country is going at this point. So I do think, yes, there will be gridlock, but Biden is the perfect president-elect to be able to handle that situation, because he has said time and time again, he will work across the aisle. And he is one of those, you know, kind of McCain politicians where bipartisanship is part of his record. So I do believe he will be an American president who will meet that moment.
You say by president-elect, he's not even quite there yet. We are still waiting to get these races in. I just want to be clear with everybody. David, I know Joe Biden says he wants to work with the other side. Do you foresee the other side wanting to work with him?
Look, Mitch McConnell famously said that his goal was to make Obama a one-term president. And so reaching across the aisle requires somebody to reach back. I do think the success of a let's call it a cross-partisan Biden administration is going to rely on the relationship and negotiation between Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer. Joe Biden's going to face two forces. He's going to be wrestling with Republican interests, but he's also going to be wrestling with a bit of the progressive base that resides in the House, right? The Democrats did a very good job coalescing around Biden, setting aside kind of the family conversation over ideology. But there will be that pull in the House. But I think if Nancy Pelosi can marshal something to the Senate on whatever the policy proposal is by, let's say, a President Joe Biden, then it comes down to whether Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer can reach agreement on what to move. I think anything that McConnell and Schumer can reach agreement on, you'll have Pelosi and Biden affirming it.
Does Nancy Pelosi keep her seat? Not her seat, her position.
Look, I'm not a Democrat, and I made the case last go-around that perhaps it was time for a change. You can't give her anything but high marks the last 2 years. I'll leave it to Democrats whether it's time for a new direction or not.
David, you're not going to answer that. What about Michael?
Look, I'm a disruptor at heart, and Nancy Pelosi's that steady hand, so I prefer to see change always. But look, we've had a tumultuous 2 years, including an impeachment where I think Speaker Pelosi should have been more aggressive. I think you'll have some in the party, in the Democratic Party, that said, yes, she should have. You'll have others that say she handled it masterfully. She has a caucus that will ultimately vote and determine. I think she has the votes to keep the speakership.
David, wrap that up for us. What do you think? I'm sorry, Michael. Michael. This is, you know, it's 3:32 in the morning, and David, your name is directly in the prompter, and I keep saying it because that is the hour of the morning, and that is me not having enough coffee. Michael, please answer that question.
Nancy Pelosi has absolutely earned the right to stay speaker. But I do think Democrats are struggling with the idea of our leadership doesn't look like the people it's supposed to represent. And so I think we've got to get younger. I think we have to get more diverse. And I think we've got to be able to talk to more people. And so I think that's where Democrats have to get better. It's messaging. It's always messaging with Democrats.
Ashley, David, and Michael, everyone, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And coming up next, where are we going to go?
We're going to go to the big board. We're going to bring Ali Velci back. He's going to break